what is your writing process like? So how do you approach like starting each book, or has it been different for each of them?
I would say there are differences between each book. You know, each book wants to be written in a slightly different way in terms of the amount of research and kind of the sort of how long it takes me for kind of, for the ideas to all sort of cohere and kind of come
Hmm.
together. But I have a pretty tried and tested kind of method now, which has worked for a few books. Have to say that doesn't stop every single book being an absolutely terrifying moment when you open up that Word document and
Yeah.
it's blank and you're like, how am I going to fill this with 100,000 words? Like, that
Yes.
is a horrible moment every single time and never gets any better. Um,
Yeah.
but I write pretty much on a yearly schedule just because of the way my deadlines work out. I
Hmm.
tend to start a book in the kind of late autumn, write for sort of 6 7 months, deliver in the kind of middle of summer. And then, lucky me, that means I get to stop just at the point when my kids go off for school holidays, because our school holidays in the UK are quite late. We have them in August,
Hmm.
which is great because they're a bit older now. But when they were smaller, there's just no writing with kind of 5 and 6 year olds running around the house. It's just
Oh
not going to happen.
yeah.
And while my editors edit the book, and then in the autumn, they come back to me with all of their notes. I incorporate them. I edit the book. We go back and forth, and then late autumn, the whole process starts again. But in terms of kind of the planning process, it's different every single time. And this sometimes my books come to me as kind of an idea on a plate, and
Hmm.
other times they're more kind of an amorphous kind of collection of inspirations sort of swirling around in my head until they cohere into something kind of vaguely book shaped. Sometimes they're half an idea and I have to figure out what the missing part is to kind of make it into a book sized thing. But
Yeah.
One Perfect Couple was, luckily enough, more or less a book that got given to me on a plate. And I
Nice.
was doing an interview. Well, it was an event. I was doing the interviewing with the writer Gillian McAllister. It was a
Yeah.
Reese's Book Club event. And I can't remember how we got on the topic, but we were talking about reality TV and, how
Mhm.
extremely easy it would be to murder one of the contestants if you were on there, because they're generally all infuriating. And Gillian said, sounds like a Ruth Ware book. And I kind of laughed it off and sort of didn't really think too much about it. But when I came to start this book,
Hmm.
um, something about her words came back to me, and I sort of thought that does sound like one of my books. Um, I hadn't watched a ton of reality TV since I was completely addicted to the first couple of series of Big Brother, which came out while I was at university
Yes.
in the UK. And like all of my friends, I was absolutely riveted.
I have been obsessed with that show in the past.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, but I think I sort of drifted away from it. And I think what I loved about the first couple of seasons, and actually what I loved about Traitors, the UK version, which came out a
Yes.
couple of years ago, was, which is kind of reflected in my books as well, is I am
Hmm.
mostly fascinated by extraordinary things happening to regular people. And I
Yeah.
think for me, what reality TV slightly lost over the sort of subsequent decades was the fact that so many of the contestants seemed to be going on it for fame and fortune. They were
Hmm.
in it not to play the game, but because they wanted, a modeling deal or a profile or, whatever it was. So it kind of morphed into something that was actually not so much about just ordinary people in a really strange artificial situation, but much
Hmm.
more about just famous people wanting to get more famous, really. And I
Yes.
didn't find that as interesting as a kind of
Yeah.
concept. Um, but anyway, so I went back, I watched a bunch of reality TV shows, I read a
Hmm.
bunch of books. There's a really interesting one called I Didn't Come Here to Make Friends by one of the former contestants on The Bachelor. I was lucky enough to be able to speak to someone who'd been on a reality TV show, and he
Oh,
gave me some
nice.
helpful pointers. And gradually, this plot sort of started to take shape in my head. And the very first chapter, it's not
Hmm.
even really a chapter, I guess it's more of a kind of prologue of One
Hmm.
Perfect Couple, is a scene that's completely different to the rest of the book. It's told in the third person. The rest of the book is all in first person, and it's a man and a woman fighting for their lives, and they're in the sea. They're trying to kill each other. She's trying to drown him, and he's fighting back and trying to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who they are. You don't know why they're there. But I knew, and that was
Yeah.
the end, not the end point of the book, because there is some stuff that happens after, but it was the kind of the climactic point of the book, the point where everything kind of crunches.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew right from the start that that was where this book was heading. And I wrote that chapter first, and then everything else flowed from there as a means of getting my characters to that point. And
Yeah.
yeah, figuring out how and why they end up there.